Welcome back to your nightmares, my children. This is Mr. Midnight speaking. I welcome you all to my humble abode. Today, we will be talking about Jeff the Killer, who needs no introduction. But before we begin, make sure you like and subscribe, because if you do not, I will send Jeff after you. Now buckle up, and always remember, the darkness always follows. I will now leave you with my narrator, so enjoy.
Jeff the Killer is a creepypasta character who is said to have murdered his entire family and then began randomly killing people, often while smiling and whispering, "Go to sleep." He is known for his ghostly white skin, black eyes, and a permanent grin on his face. He is also said to be able to manipulate reality and control people's mind. He is often portrayed as a supernatural being who cannot be killed and continues to haunt and kill people in their sleep. So this is Jeff the Killer. You wake up at 3 a.m., disturbed by some subtle shifting sound within the room. Just on the edge of hearing, propping up on one arm, you survey the room looking for some source for the noise, hoping beyond hope that you won't find one. At first, your hopes are raised. Everything seems to be silent. Everything seems to be still. But it isn't. From behind the long concealing drape of the curtain, a voice with flickering serpentine hiss whispers, "Go to sleep." Suddenly, you know what's about to happen and exactly who is waiting to meet you. As recognizable and widely known as he is feared, Jeff the Killer, the villain of numerous stories littering the internet, is one of the best known and most widely referenced creepypasta characters to have emerged from the shadowy corners of the web over the past few decades. But exactly who or what is this infamous denizen of the darkness? Where did the character come from? How has it evolved? And from which horrific pit of hell of the internet did that haunting image emerge? Let's delve and find out. Firstly, for those unfamiliar with the character Jeff the Killer, the most widely known creepypasta on this character can be found on the internet anywhere. The story is usually linked to a version of this image in which the character is shown to be noseless, with bleached white skin, a leering permanent grin, and lank black hair. For those wanting a quick overview, the story of Jeff Killer goes something like this. At 13 years old, Jeff moves with his parents and brother Louis to a new town. Here, Jeff and his sibling encounter 3 bullies and are threatened with knives. Jeff beats these bullies badly, with Louis taking the blame for the assault and being carted off by the ever-reliable police. Guilt-ridden and depressed at having let Louis take the blame for his action, Jeff's day gets even worse when he meets the bullies again and is horribly burnt in an attack with alcohol and bleach. This burning results in Jeff being permanently disfigured, his skin bleached white physically, whilst his mind snaps. Upon being discharged for some reason, his doctors apparently attributing Jeff's insane behavior to the painkillers he is taking. Jeff arrives home and proceeds to make a bad situation worse by purposely mutilating his already disfigured face, cutting a permanent smile into his mouth and cheeks and burning off his eyelids so that he can always see his face. Jeff then goes on to kill both his parents and his brother Louis, meeting him with the instruction, "Go to sleep," before stabbing him and disappearing on a wider and less discriminating killing spree, which it would seem continues to this day. According to the Creepypasta explanation, Jeff's fixed grin is due to scarring he inflicted upon himself. His eyes stare wildly because he burnt off his own eyelids, and his skin is lily white as a result of having been horribly burnt by bullies with a combination of alcohol and bleach. The photograph that accompanies the many Jeff the Killer stories, and which looks like a cross between Michael Jackson and a demented dolphin, is widely known not only from the many derivative creepypastas using the character, but due to its widespread use in screamer videos alongside Jeff's famous catchphrase, "Go to sleep." However, it seems that the details of exactly how Jeff the Killer ended up with his hideous appearance corresponding as they do to this image were retrofitted, the rationales being written to match the image rather than the other way around. As with many creepypasta characters, there seems to have been an ekpharistic element to Jeff the Killer's creation. And what the hell does that mean? Well, basically it means based on or inspired by a work of art. Now, whilst most wouldn't look at the image of Jeff the Killer and regard it as art, it is commonly agreed the image upon which the story of Jeff the Killer is based actually predates the words making up his story, meaning that the creators began with the creepy image and went from there. The story was written to fit the picture. Therefore, to really get a handle on the origins of Jeff the Killer, it is first necessary to divide the investigation into two parts. First, we need to look at the origin of the image of Jeff the Killer that accompanied the original story, not to mention the many derivative stories and memes that have evolved from it, and then look at where the story that grew out of the image came from. Interestingly, the original Jeff the Killer image and its origin has developed a mythology all of its own, with various competing theories and bogus explanations being put forward. Let's have a go at unpacking them. The first noted appearance of the famous image is from way back in 2005 on Pyre.cc, a Japanese message board. The image later appeared in a Japanese YouTube video, NNN, a clip identified by some as Scary Film Project, in which names and ages of future victims are listed. The video was uploaded in August of 2007 and features a fleeting glimpse of Jeff the Killer's image, which can be seen on screen at the 4 minutes 11 second mark, followed by the words, "Good night," which may be an early incarnation of the famous "Go to sleep" catchphrase with which Jeff is associated. Now, this video without a backstory or explanation existed before the story or even the name Jeff the Killer surfaced seems to confirm that it was indeed the image that came first. The association of the image with the name Jeff the Killer or any related title came in 2008 when a user on the forum Newgrounds uploaded the image using the name Killer Jeff with the somewhat dubious claim that the image was a self-portrait depicting him. Shortly following this first association of the photograph with the name, the first incarnation of anything resembling an actual story of Jeff the Killer and featuring the now famous image was a video uploaded by Cesar on October 3rd, 2008, with some sources claiming Cesar and the previous Newgrounds uploader Killer Jeff to be the same person. The original video, which notably contained music by Pixies, which may have been the reason the video was eventually removed, has been claimed by its creator as the original Jeff the Killer origin story, and indeed does predate the most well-known creepypasta version of the table. Additionally, it is worth noting that Caesar has been critical of the details given in later incarnations of the story, insisting presumably in reference to his original concept of the character that bullies were not involved in the accident that led to Jeff's altered appearance, but rather that he slipped on some soap whilst carrying acid he intended to use to clean the drains in his bathroom. Cesar has also pointed out in his version Jeff does not kill his parents and brother, and even has a different real name. The later Creepypasta incarnations, Jeff the Killer, the story it is based upon, is also somewhat convoluted in history. Despite being very popular, the original version uploaded in 2011 was derided by many as being weakly told and of low quality, with many insisting that the story did not meet the quality assurance standards of the site. It was eventually moved from Creepypasta to a sister site dedicated to badly written creepypastas. However, owing to the popularity of the character, this removal prompted many users to simply re-upload the story in an attempt to placate these fans and to establish a better version of Jeff's story. A competition was launched in 2015 to create a remake. The winning story, which exists in an longer version and a shorter version, was written by Banning Kellum, and this is the version which most people today are familiar with. Whilst this all explains the backstory of the creepypasta tale itself, the question remains, where did the image come from in the first place? Here is where fact and fiction begin to blur, with even the photograph's origin being obscured by half-truth and myth. For some time, it was believed the photograph was a Photoshop manipulated image of a girl identified as Katie Robinson. The story went that this young girl, who was considered by some internet trolls to be overweight, was eventually driven to suicide by online bullies. Her image was then photoshopped and used as the basis for the most widely known Jeff the Killer image. It's a tragic story which, though it exists entirely separately from Jeff the Killer, Creepypasta lends Jeff's image of the bleached-skinned, wide-eyed smiler an even more sinister aspect and a legitimate reason to find that image unnerving, depicting as it did not only a deceased girl but a victim of the same species of bullying that the fictional character endures. Unfortunately, or actually fortunately to be honest, this story also turns out to be nonsense. The Katie Robinson story and the entire idea that the Jeff the Killer image used the photograph of a deceased girl as its basis has been debunked. The girl featured in the photograph, alleged to belong to the unfortunate Miss Robinson, is actually a girl named Heather White, who has confirmed that the image alleged to have been manipulated has nothing to do with the famous image of Jeff the Killer. Another theory which has gained traction in recent years is that the original photograph was of an unnamed Stickham girl. This girl, who is alleged to have been crying for attention, was said to have used images in which the flash from the camera or monitor illuminated and overexposed her face, giving it the bleached out white appearance familiar from the Jeff Killer images. Her image was subsequently screenshotted and adopted by another anonymous user, who then posed as her using a photograph to ask, "Am I pretty?" Responding to what seemed to be naked self-promotion or hunting for sympathy clicks, viewers of the image gradually added to a thread in which they manipulated the image so that it gradually became more and more distorted. These Photoshop images are believed by some to have evolved into the original Jeff the Killer photographs. Well, that's one theory at least, and currently the one that seems to be given the most credence. Other theories as to the image's origin are that the root image is in fact simply a manipulated photo of Jeff the Killer's original poster, Cesar, wearing a latex mask. This is actually what he claimed, though the fact that the image has been identified in videos and other sources a number of years before he posted his story makes this claim seem somewhat unreliable. as is the theory that the image is a manipulation of the overly attached girlfriend meme because of the similarly wide-eyed and smiling pose. This theory can be debunked almost immediately, owing to the fact that the meme in question features an image from 2012, meaning that it came into existence long after the earliest known version of the Jeff image, and indeed the original Jeff the Killer story. So far, the farthest back anyone has been able to trace the image is to a Japanese site called pya.cc, where two versions of the image were found. Both faces are noseless. The one has added contour shading around the eyes and the area where the nose would be. It has also been noted that the two images have different eye shapes, with one looking more like the eyes from a stuffed toy or cartoon character.
Well, my children, thank you all for listening. I hope this filled you with fear. No matter if this is a creepypasta, I will still send Jeff the Killer after you. Do not worry, because he does exist. Thank you all for listening. And always remember, the darkness always follows. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. Say her name 3 times in front of a mirror, and you'll summon her ghost. Let's not waste time and get into this creepypasta. I want you to always remember, the darkness always follows. I will now leave you with my narrator, so enjoy.
The legend of Bloody Mary has been scaring children and adults alike for decades. But where did this terrifying tale come from? And what is the story behind it? She, Bloody Mary, is a star of one of the most famous urban legends in the world. People all over the globe have tried to summon her ghost, and many claim to have succeeded. But who is she, and what is with this terrifying legend? The origins of the Bloody Mary legend are shrouded in mystery. Some people believe that the story dates back to medieval times, when people believed in the supernatural and the power of mirrors. Others think that it's a more recent creation, perhaps from the 1960s or 1970s. But regardless of its origins, one thing is certain: the legend of Bloody Mary has endured the test of time. So how do you summon Bloody Mary? The basic premise of the legend is simple. If you stand in front of a mirror in a dimly lit room and say Bloody Mary 3 times, her ghost will appear. Some versions of the legend say that you need to light a candle and spin around while you say her name, while others say that you need to hold a candle and look into the mirror while you say her name. But who is Bloody Mary, and why is she so scary? The answer to that question is equally mysterious. Some people believe that Bloody Mary is a witch who was executed for practicing black magic. Others say that she was a woman who was murdered by her husband or lover. Still, others claim that she was a ghost who haunted a specific location, such as a school or a cemetery. Whatever her origins, the story of Bloody Mary is a terrifying one. Some versions of the legend say that if you summon her ghost, she'll appear in the mirror and try to scratch your eyes out. Others say that she'll reach through the mirror and drag you into the spirit world, where you'll be trapped forever. But perhaps the scariest version of the Bloody Mary legend is the one that says that she'll appear in the mirror and show you your own death. Imagine standing in front of a mirror and watching as your own demise plays out before your very eyes. It's no wonder that this legend has been scaring people for generations. Of course, there's no scientific evidence to support the existence of ghosts or supernatural beings, but that hasn't stopped people from trying to summon Bloody Mary over the years. Some people do it just for fun, while others are genuinely convinced that they'll be able to make contact with the other side. But if you do decide to try and summon Bloody Mary, be warned, you might not like what you see. The legend of Bloody Mary is a reminder that the line between the living and the dead is a thin one, and that there are some things in this world that we might be better off not knowing. So what do you think? Will you summon Bloody Mary? The choice is yours. But remember, sometimes the scariest things are the ones that we bring upon ourselves.
Well, my children, thank you all for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe, because if you do not, you won't even need to say her name in the bathroom or a dim, dark lit place. She will come right after you, because I am in contact with her. So make sure you like and subscribe. And always remember, the darkness always follows. Welcome back to your nightmares, my children. This is Mr. Midnight speaking. I welcome you all to my humble abode. Today, we have dedicated this episode to the Slender Man, who needs no introduction. So before we begin, make sure you subscribe and like, otherwise I will send my friend Slenderman after you. Now buckle up, and always remember, the darkness always follows. I will now leave you with my narrator, so enjoy.
The Slender Man is a creepypasta story about a strange paranormal creature that abducts children. Slender Man is often described as being an unusually tall man, dressed in a black suit, white shirt and black tie. He has long, thin arms and legs, and his face is said to be completely blank. According to the legend, Slenderman can stretch or shorten his arms at will, and has tentacle-like appendages protruding from his back. His presence can cause memory loss, insomnia, paranoia, nosebleeds, and coughing fits. Whenever the Slender Man appears, children are abducted. They say he lures them into the woods, then controls their mind and forces them to walk into his outstretched arms. They are never seen again. A series of woodcuts were found in Germany. They date back to the 16th century and feature a tall man with no face, named Der Grubman. According to the inscriptions, he is a mythical creature who lives in the Black Forest and creeps out of the woods at night to spirit away bad children. An old German journal dated 1702 contains a chilling account. My child, my Lars, he is gone, taken from his bed. All that was left was a scrap of black clothing. Lars came running into my bathroom yesterday, screaming at the top of his lungs. The tall man is outside, he cried. When I asked him what he was talking about, he told me about Der Grossman. He said he went into the groves by our village and found one of my cows dead. Its carcass was hanging from a tree. I thought nothing of it at first, but now my poor Lars is gone. We must find him and leave this place before we are all killed. I am sorry, my son. I should have listened to you. May God forgive me. Another account was found in a book of collected folklore concerning supernatural creatures. When I was younger, a cousin of mine came to live with us. He was older than me and my sisters, maybe 16 or 17. We were the only family he had left in the world. He was the worst liar you'd ever meet. Anything he'd tell you was a lie. I liked him a lot. We slept in a loft during the summer because it was cooler up there, me and him, and in the winters we slept on the floor closer to the stove. My sisters had their own room. So one night my cousin wakes me up by punching me in the shoulder, and it's summer, so we're up in the loft, and my first thought when he wakes me up is to just push him out, because I'm not happy at being waked up, But before I can say anything, he puts his hand over my mouth, and even though it's dark, I can hear that he's scared. Listen, he says, and so I listen real careful. It's just scratching like something on the roof, and the roof is right over our heads, mind you. Cause we're in the loft, I was a little rattled, but I wasn't having none of it. So I say to him, it's just some raccoon or a cat. No, says John, I heard it before I waked you up. It's like footsteps, like someone's walking up there. I wasn't taking no truck with that. I told you he was the awfulest liar, so I went back to bed. But the next day my cousin tried to tell Pap about it, and Pap wasn't having no truck with it either. But one night later on, while we were all having supper, Pap sent out my younger sister to fetch water from the pump we had in the back. After a while, we heard Lily scream, and it was Ma who got up first, and then Pap. The rest of us stayed at the table, because we was like to get in trouble if Lily was heard and we was there to gloat. Soon enough though, we heard Pap and Ma shouting too, so me and John went out to see if they needed our help. All they had was the water pail Lily carried out, and there wasn't no other sign of her. At first, I didn't understand what was going on with both Ma and Pap shouting, and by that time my other sisters come out and they started crying, and my cousin was just standing there in the yard looking off towards something. It's the man walking yonder, he yells, and he's pointing out across the field. No one's listening to him but me, and he keeps saying it. It's the man walking yonder, it's the man walking yonder. You already know it was supper time, so you know the sun was setting and it was hard to see. But when I looked out over that field at the back house, the whole thing was lit up orange, and there was a row of big black trees that was the edge of the woods, And I swear to you that I saw one of them trees moving, like a man walking away, but it couldn't have been a man, cause there ain't no man that tall and skinny. Papa seen it too, I think. He took us inside and locked all the doors, and he made us keep still while he got out his rifle. We waited like that all night, Ma crying the whole time. When the sun come up, we took a wagon into town and told folks what happened, though as I recall, nothing much came of it. John ran off a few weeks later, and we got a new house close to the mill where Papa worked. I still can't manage to look at trees during sunset though, especially not on windy days when they all move back and forth like a man walking away. The following is a witness account of an encounter with the Slender Man. After waking up with a jolt, the girl laid in bed a few seconds later, reaching over to switch on her bed lamp. She tried to remember exactly what had stolen her sweet lumber away. When she couldn't, the brunette swung her legs over the side of the bed and heaved herself up. Checking the time on her phone, she snorted when she saw it was midnight, the witching hour. Knowing that sleep would only evade her, she left her bedroom for the kitchen, a good cup of coffee on her mind. As she passed by her front door, a chill ran down her spine. It's only winter, she told herself, focusing again on the coffee plant. Measuring out scoops, water, and preparing a cup kept her occupied, but as the dark liquid boiled, she had nothing left to keep her mind from wandering off. The chill returned, and she couldn't help but glance behind her to the front door. It stood there innocently enough, just like always. The deadbolt was still in place, and she could see nothing amiss with it. Turning back to her coffee, she did her best to forget about the feeling. With a cup in hand, she started back towards the bedroom. As she walked by the front door, she decided that a quick glance out of the peephole would help calm her restless thoughts. The chill worsened with each step she took towards the door and further away from the safety and warmth of her blankets. She pressed her empty hand against the cold metal door and took a deep breath before leading her eye to the peephole. At first, she could only see an inky blackness and somehow seemed to swirl in itself. When she blinked in surprise, the void melted away. She wished it hadn't. In its place there stood what she could only guess was once a man. The limbs were long and inhumanly awkward, with bulky joints branching off into several arms, not unlike the branches of a tree. The creature was wrapped in a black suit, somehow making the thing more nightmarish to her. The icing on the cake, however, was what passed as the hellish thing's face. It was though her mind blurred the ghastly visage to spare itself further shock and horror. She shoved herself away from the door, with her hand still pressed against it. The scalding mug of coffee fell, the liquid burning her bare legs as she fell backwards and tried to crawl away from the door. She knew somehow that her mind hadn't been playing tricks on her. As she crab walked away from the door, she watched as tendrils as black as the void itself snake around through the cracks. The girl was trapped between the instinct to flee and the gut feeling to not turn her back on the door. When the door jolted, the urge to flee overcame her, and she slipped in the burning liquid as she tried to make it back to her room. She knew deep down that she was trapping herself in a corner, where she had to get away from the door. The girl was halfway down the hallway when she heard the previously locked door creak open. She screamed and slipped into a wall, cracking her chin on it and stunning her. After that, there was only darkness. "Nicole," a warm male voice snapped the woman out of her trance. As she turned around, she was met by one of her sister's doctors. She nodded, not sure if she should say anything, or even if she could find her voice if she did have something to say. That morning, she had gotten an urgent phone call from the hospital, saying that her sister Lindsay was there. Before they had even let her see her, the doctors had pulled her off to the side and insisted that they talk to her about what might have happened. Phrases like self-inflicted and assault had been thrown around, and Nicole felt her mind reel. She still hadn't fully understood what they had been saying until she saw Lindsay with her own eyes. Her little sister had a bandage wrapped around her head, covering both of her ears as well as her eyes. They said it was to keep her now dead-end eyes from drying out and to try to keep infection out of the wounds Lindsay had made to her ears. The doctors had guessed that either she or someone else had jammed a pencil into them to keep her off balance or to deafen herself against something. There was a mix of first and second degree burns on her hands, legs and feet, from what was assumed to be the coffee her neighbors found slipped all over the entry to her apartment. As Nicole walked into her sister's hospital room the first time, she thought she had spied the silhouette of a man in the window. That, she knew, was impossible. Her sister's room was on the third story of the hospital.
Well, my children, thank you all for listening. I hope this made you feel the Slender Man. I'll see you very soon. So until then, love the darkness as it always follows. Welcome back to your nightmares, my children. This is Mr. Midnight speaking. I welcome you all to my humble abode. Today, I will be visiting someone we all know. We all know him. Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? No, not him. Who lives in a monument under the sea? Squidward tentacles. Today, we will look at this creepypasta. So buckle up and let me feast on your childhood fears. And let me destroy your childhood memories of this show. Also, make sure you like and subscribe, or I will come pay you a visit in your nightmares. And you do not want that. Let's begin, and always remember, the darkness always follows. I will now leave you with my narrator, so enjoy.
Now, this creepypasta is known on the internet by 4 names: Squidward's suicide, Squidward's death, Squidward dies, or suicidal Squidward. Now, the story behind this is that the lead animators and sound editors were in the editing room reviewing the final cut for Season 4, Episode 1. They received a copy of the episode and gathered around the screen to watch. The title of the episode was supposed to be Fear of a Krabby Patty. But when the title card came up on the screen, it read Squidward's suicide. Everyone in the room was more than a little confused. The SpongeBob SquarePants theme tune played as usual, and the episode began with Squidward practicing on his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes. SpongeBob was laughing, and Squidward stopped playing to yell at him to keep it down, as he had a concert that night and needed to practice. SpongeBob said okay and went with Patrick to see Sandy. The Bubble Splash screen came up, followed by the end of Squidward's concert. It was at this point that the episode began to get very strange. As Squidward's concert ended, there was discontented murmuring in the crowd, and they began to boo him loudly and maliciously. Squidward looked visibly afraid. SpongeBob was standing in front of the crowd, and he, too, was booing. Even more odd was the fact that all of the characters had hyper-realistic eyes. They were very detailed, and their pupils were glowing red. The next scene showed Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very depressed and forlorn. Behind him, in his porthole window, a dreary night sky could be seen. The unsettling part was that there was absolutely no sound. Squidward just sat there in silence for about 30 seconds. Then he started to sob softly. Then he put his tentacle hands over his eyes and cried quietly for a full minute. Gradually, the sound grew louder and a slight breeze could be heard in the background. The camera slowly zoomed in on Squidward's face, and his sobbing grew louder and louder, full of hurt and anger. The sound of the wind became more severe, as if a storm was brewing. Very faintly, in the background, something that sounded like hollow laughter could be heard. It came at odd intervals and never lasted more than a second. After 30 seconds of this, the screen blurred and twitched violently, and something flashed over the screen as if a single frame had been replaced. The lead animation editor paused the video and rewound it, frame by frame. Suddenly, something horrible flashed up on the screen. It was a still photo of a young boy. His face was mangled and bloody, and one of his eyeballs was dangling out of its socket. His stomach had been sliced open, and his intestines lay in a pile beside him. The editors gathered around the screen. They couldn't fathom what they were seeing. They pressed play and continued to watch the video, hoping that it was all just some sick joke being played on them by the animators. On the screen, Squidward was still sobbing, but the sound was louder than before. There seemed to be blood coming from his eyes and running down his cheeks. The blood did not seem to be animated. It looked all too real. The wind sounded like a raging storm. The deep, unsettling laughter became more and more frequent. Suddenly, the screen twitched again. One of the editors paused the video and rewound. Another single frame photo flashed up on the screen. This time, it was a little girl. She was lying face down in a pool of blood. Her left eyeball was hanging by a thread, and her entrails were piled on top of her. There were deep cuts all over her back. One of the interns in the room said he felt sick and rushed out into the corridor. The editor clicked a button and the episode resumed playing. Squidward was silent again, but there was no sound at all. He put his tentacles down and his eyes were now done in hyper-realistic and detailed. They were bleeding, bloodshot and pulsating. He just stared at the camera as if he was watching the viewer. Everyone in the room shifted uncomfortably. A few seconds later, he started sobbing again. But this time, he didn't cover his eyes. The sound was loud and piercing, and screams rang out in the background. Bloody tears were dripping down his face as the wind began blowing again, and the deep voiced laughter returned. Another still photo flashed up on the screen, and the editor paused the video again. This time, the photo was of a different young boy. His right eyeball was hanging out of its socket, and a large hand was reaching into his open stomach and pulling out his intestines. Everyone in the room gasped at this, and one of the sound editors vomited on the floor. Everybody was shaking and frightened. Someone rushed out to fetch a mop. The editor stopped the video and said that he would call the producer and show him the horrifying photos contained in the video. 15 minutes later, the producer burst into the room and demanded to know why he had been called down to the studio. The editor didn't answer him. He just pressed play and the episode continued on the screen. Squidward was just staring at the camera, his face in close up. The soundtrack became silent and a deep voice was heard whispering, "Do it!" The camera pulled back, revealing that Squidward was holding a shotgun in his tentacle hands. He suddenly raised the shotgun, placed the barrel in his mouth and pulled the trigger. There was a huge explosion and realistic blood and brain matter splattered against the wall behind him. His head disintegrated and his body fell sideways and collapsed on the bed. The last 5 excruciating seconds of the episode show his body on the bed, on his side, one eye dangling on what's left of his head above the floor, staring blankly at it. Then the episode cut to black. The producer was furious and demanded to know what the heck was going on. Most people left the room feeling sick to their stomachs. Just a handful of people remained in the editing room, attempting to figure out what exactly had gone wrong with the episode. The only explanation they could come up with was that somewhere along the line in the production process, the video footage had been edited by someone. The logs were consulted and everyone who had worked on the video was accounted for. The editors attempted to analyze the video file, but there was no timestamp. All of the video equipment involved in the production line was examined for viruses, malware, and other malicious files, but everything checked out fine. Due to the nature of the photos, the footage was handed over to the police, but nothing came of it. None of the children in the photos were ever identified, and the video files yielded no clues or physical evidence. To this day, nobody at Nickelodeon's animated studios can explain what happened.
Well, my children, thank you all for listening. I hope this changes your view on the world of SpongeBob SquarePants. Nothing is as innocent as it seems. Even the most innocent cartoons are plagued with monsters. I'll see you very soon. So until then, love the darkness as it always follows.
Welcome back. I have some very sad news. Mr. Midnight has disappeared. I do not know where or when he will be back, so we will have to do this without him. He will be back sooner or later. He does this quite often. Today we will be looking at some creepypastas. Well, a certain creepypasta, The Rake. But before we do, make sure you like and subscribe if you think The Rake is real. Now let's begin. The Rake is widely known as a creature with a distinctive appearance, featuring a bald head, pale skin, and glowing eyes that stare straight into the camera. This creature has become a staple in creepypasta, appearing in various settings and stories written by different authors. In 2003, there were reports of a strange human-like creature in the northeastern US, which briefly gained local media attention before all information about it was mysteriously wiped out. Most accounts of the creature were erased from both online and written sources. The sightings took place primarily in rural New York, and witnesses claimed to have encountered an unknown creature. These encounters range from fear-inducing to playful and curious. Although the published accounts are no longer available, the memories remain vivid. In 2006, a group of individuals who had experienced these sightings joined forces to search for answers and collected over 24 documents from various continents dating back to the 12th century, all with similar stories. all with similar stories. Let's delve into these stories. A Suicide Note, 1964. As I prepare to take my life, I feel it necessary to assuage any guilt or pain I have introduced through this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him. For once, I awoke and felt his presence, and once I awoke and saw his form. Once again, I awoke and heard his voice, and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might next awake to experience. I cannot ever wake. Goodbye. This was found in the same wooden box where two empty envelopes addressed to William and Rose were found, and one loose personal letter with no envelope. Dearest Lily, I have prayed for you. He spoke your name. A journal entry translated from Spanish in the 1880. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand, I will not sleep. His voice. A Baroness Log, 1691. He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed, I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again at the request of the rake. The Rake, from a witness, 2006. 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 a.m, I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used the moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he got out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly his knee almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for half a second, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man, or a large, hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled around the side of the bed and then crawled quickly in a flailing sort of motion right along the bed until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, just looking at my husband. The creature then placed his hand on his knee and ran into the hallway leading to the kids' room. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter, Clara, The creature ran down the stairs, while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the rake." My husband drove his car into a lake that night while rushing our daughter to the hospital. He did not survive. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of two other people in New York who had seen the creature we now refer to as the rake. It took us, four of us, about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believe to be the accounts of the rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-ups. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages and never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night. Every night for 2 weeks, I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the second week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blurring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. On the first day of the third week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head make me very upset. I have not seen the rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I slept. I know and fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me. The rake is a mysterious creature known for its ghostly appearance and strange behavior. With its pale skin, large fanged and taloned mouth, and bulbous eyes, the rake is often depicted as a mutated dog-like creature that stalks its prey in the woods or forested areas. However, with the widespread popularity of the rake, its habitat and behaviors have become less defined, and it is now commonly portrayed as appearing in more urban areas, even in people's bedroom at night. The appearance of the rake is distinctive and intriguing, featuring large reflective eyes, a drooping jaw with a fang-filled mouth, and either a missing or skull-like nose. It is typically shown as naked and crawling on all fours, which suggests that it prefers to stalk its prey like a quadruped animal, even though it is capable of standing on 2 legs. The origins and development of the rake's appearance are linked directly to the myth and an image that once even fueled mainstream media. The rake is a mythical creature that originated from an anonymous poster's suggestion on a 4chan thread. in 2005. The creature was developed and manipulated by several users, and its description went through multiple changes before settling on its current form. The first story featuring the rake was published on Brain Somerville's blog in 2006. The rake became more popular after appearing on various forums and platforms like LiveJournal, Something Awful, 4chan, the Paranormal subreddit, and Creepypasta forums. The widely shared image of the Berwick monster, often associated with the rake, was actually a hoax meant to be a depiction of a creature from the video game Resistance 3. The image was later picked up by mainstream media outlets, but it appeared after the story and discussions about the rake's appearance had already been established. Well, my fellow horror enthusiasts, I hope this fulfilled your desire, fulfilled your craving for horror. I'm sorry that Mr. Midnight wasn't here, but he'll be here soon, I'm sure. But, I'll say his favorite catchphrase. I'll see you again very soon. So until then, love the darkness, as it always follows.
Welcome to the depths of darkness, my children. This is Mr. Midnight speaking, and I welcome you all to my twisted domain. Today, we will journey into the realm of terrifying trains. But before we do, beware for those who do not like and subscribe. They will be forever haunted by the demons of my creation. Brace yourselves and remember, the darkness always follows.
Charlie the Choo Choo is a children's book written by Brill Evans and illustrated by Ned Demeron. The story is about a magical train named Charlie, who along with his human friends, Engineer Bob and Conductor Annie, take children on adventures through the magical world inside the train. The story starts with Engineer Bob and Conductor Annie working on the train, and Charlie the Choo Choo train, being a magical train, comes to life and starts speaking to them. They are surprised at first, but quickly become friends with Charlie. Charlie even has a special song. Don't ask me silly questions, I won't play silly games. I'm just a simple choo-choo train, and I'll always be the same. I only want to race along beneath the bright blue sky, and be a happy choo-choo train until the day I die. As the story progresses, Engineer Bob and Conductor Annie take the children on a journey through the magical world inside the train. They pass through a dark tunnel, while Charlie has to use his bright headlights to guide them through. They also pass through a snowy mountain, where Charlie has to use his powerful engine to push through the heavy snow. Along the way, they meet interesting characters such as a friendly talking steam engine and a grumpy old diesel engine. Charlie also shows them different places and things such as going through a forest, passing a waterfall, and even taking them on a trip to the moon. The children have a great time, and the journey is filled with fun and adventure. As they continue on their journey, they come across a broken bridge, and Engineer Bob and Conductor Annie are worried they won't be able to make it across. But Charlie, being the determined and resourceful train that he is, comes up with a plan to safely cross the bridge using his own strength and the help of his friends. With teamwork and determination, they are able to overcome this obstacle and reach their destination safely. However, towards the end of the story, it is revealed that the train station where they work is being modernized, and the new management plans to replace Charlie with a newer, more advanced train. This news is devastating for Engineer Bob and Conductor Annie, who have grown to love Charlie as a friend and companion. They come up with a plan to save Charlie and make sure that he is not replaced. They work hard to fix up Charlie, making him look brand new and more advanced than ever before. They also show the new management all the wonderful things Charlie can do, such as talking and taking children on magical adventures. Eventually, their efforts pay off and the new management decide to keep Charlie as the main train at the station. The book has a strong message about friendship, teamwork, and the power of imagination. It is a fun, imaginative, and adventurous story that children will enjoy. However, there is a dark twist to the story. The author, Bell Evans, is basically a pseudonym adopted by Stephen King. And this has a direct link to the Dark Towers. And much of the Choo Choo Charlie is actually taken from the Dark Tower universe. Brill Evan is plunked from the page of the series, and while Charlie himself is in the fixture of the universe, a real train named Blaine the Mono, which shares many of Charlie's characteristics, exists in the world of the Dark Tower. Now this is why there's a game called Choo Choo Charles, and this game was actually inspired by Stephen King's the Charlie's Choo Choo and the link between the Dark Tower. In this game that was inspired by this children's story, in this game the player is summoned by Eugene, who summons the player, who is a monster hunter, to deal with the half-trained, half-giga spider Charles. Charles at the start attacks them and kills Eugene, but not before Eugene tells the player to find Charles' eggs. Once he finds those eggs, he can summon Charles and fight him. Eugene's son Paul and the inhabitants of the island have formulated a plan to defeat Charles, but they need the player to execute it. The player is let loose on the island with a train mounted with a machine gun, with the goal of traversing the island to meet with various non-player characters. These characters give the player keys to the mines where Charles' glowing eggs are located, scraps with which to upgrade the train, and weapons like a flamethrower, rocket launcher, and anti-tank cannon to better fend off Charles. The player also comes into contact with cultists led by Warren Charles III, who plan on using Charles for world domination. The player also learns that Warren is responsible for causing Charles' awakening, having owned a mining company that dug too deep. After collecting all 3 eggs, the player summons Charles, who transforms into Hell Charles and kills Warren before attacking the player. After a grueling battle, the player successfully lures Charles onto a bridge that they and Paul rigged with explosives and detonates it, sending Charles plummeting face first onto a large metal pole, instantly killing him. However, in a post-credit scene, it is revealed that Charles has multiple eggs hiding in the cavern, indicating his return. Choo Choo Charles was developed by Gavin Eisenbiers on his own using Unreal Engine. He recorded the development process in blogs on YouTube. The Choo Choo Train, like I said, was inspired by Charlie the Choo Choo, a 2016 children's book written by Stephen King, as part of the Dark Tower series, as well as Thomas the Tank Engine. As you can see, there is a link between Charlie the Choo Choo and Choo Choo Charles. They both are the same thing, as the game was inspired by the book, and the book is not as innocent as it seems, as it is Stephen King who wrote this book. So as you know, everything is linked to his dark, twisted realm. So now that you know the origin of Charles, who was an engine, happy, smiling, but turned evil, that is the story. And that is a secret of Choo Choo Charles that you probably did not know.
Well, my unsuspecting children, I thank you all for listening. I hope you're all shaking with fear, because that's the taste I crave. The taste of your terror is like a delicacy to me. And always remember, the darkness is always lurking, and the darkness always follows.